afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Hannah Santos, and I'm a student at MVRHS conducting an oral history interview in collaboration with MVTV and the Asalh organization, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. Today, I'm here with Dr. Thelma Hart Johnson, president of the Martha's Vineyard branch of Asalh. Dr. Johnson, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
My pleasure.
Great, let's jump right in. Where were you born?
I was born in Brooksville, Florida, May 7th, 1938.
What was the community where you were born? Was it rural, urban, or suburban?
It was a very rural community at the time. Well, in 1938, most things were rural, but it was a small community at the time that has grown a lot since then.
Tell me a little bit about the invisible lines within the community that you observed and experienced it.
In my community, it was geographical invisible lines because there was definitely areas that you knew were for African Americans or people of color, and there were communities where only whites were allowed to live. Even though you could have afford to live there, there was no such thing as crossing the color line. And we didn't necessarily have what we call we lived across the railroad tracks. It was just that certain regions were specifically for African Americans.
Okay. Do you have any siblings? If so, how many?
I have no living siblings. I have two sisters who preceded me in death, but I have no living siblings at this time.
Oh. Can you share with us a little bit about your mother?
My mother was a grand lady, in my opinion. She stopped school when she was in 6th grade.
Wow.
And began to work to help support herself and her family. She was born, I was checking today, if she were living, she'd be 99 years old. And at the time that she stopped school at 6th grade, she began to do work as a maid and a nursemaid for white families.
If you don't mind me asking, why did she stop going to school in 6th grade?
At the time, it was normative, unfortunately, for African American youth to not have access to schooling as did whites. For an example, she told me when she was a young girl that sometimes, because there were like people who say grew string beans, they would close the African American schools, and a truck would come to the parking lot, and children would go and get on this truck and go to pick beans for the local farmers. And as you asked me about the invisible lines, I don't think that there were any trucks pulling up to the white schools to have children get on the truck to go pick beans. So, and there were not opportunities for high schools in her community.
Wow.
I believe she told me that, for an example, in Brooksville, if you lived there, there was a neighboring town. I don't remember the town, but they would have to take a bus to a neighboring town where there was a high school, but at the time, there was not a high school or further education for African Americans in her community.
Okay. You and I previously have spoken about your genealogy. Would you like to chat a bit about that?
Oh my goodness, yes. And if you remember, I said to you that I was so happy to be able to find out things about myself. For an example, I had my DNA done in 2017 out of curiosity after it became popular then to try to find out who are you. So I had mine done, and I found out that I am 84.3% African. Wow. And of that, I am 45.9% Nigerian. I am 29.0% Sierra Leonean. I am 4.2% Kenyan. I am 3%. It just says from Central Africa, 2.1% from North Africa, and in East Europe, I found through research that I am 13.5% Ukrainian.
Wow.
And look at this, 2.2% South Asian. That makes up my 100%. Now, you know that I have not a clue as to where or who these people are to whom I'm related, but the one that of all of these that blew my mind was to find out I was 13.5% Ukrainian, and as the war in Ukrainian emerged, I said, oh my goodness, it kind of tweaks your interest and you want to say, oh, what's going on? I'm 13.5% Ukrainian, and I wanted to substantiate that. My son, I shared this with my older son. He said, Ma, that's interesting. I think I'll have mine done. And his percentages were very close to mine. For an example, I don't remember all of that except when he got to the European part where I'm 13.5%. His was 35 point something, and that's because his father's legacy comes from Caucasian background. So it is great to know your roots, even though you don't have the specificity of who it was. So I really enjoyed learning this information about myself.
What led you to go on this path of becoming an educator?
I can remember when I was a little girl, I always enjoyed playing school. And I don't know why, but I do remember that we had back steps that my playmates would come over and I'd have them sit up on the steps and I'd be the teacher. So that I used to like to play school. I don't remember this, but my mother says that in our hometown, I was sitting on the front porch and children were passing by on their way to school, and I was supposed to be sitting on the front porch. And since she came out on the front porch and I was not there, and she said she just knew that I had followed the children to school, and she said, sure enough, I still had on my nightgown and no shoes. I just followed the children to school, and she said that when she walked in the door, the teacher says, I thought someone would be coming for her pretty soon. So I think school is kind of like was etched in my DNA that this is something I enjoyed doing. And also, when I was going to college, I went to Bethune-Cookman College. It was a college at the time and now a university. The options for African American females were not necessarily you had to do that, but you were almost always counseled into becoming a teacher or a nurse. I chose teaching, and I majored in elementary education at Bethune-Cookman College when I went there. And I can't say who instilled, but I know that I liked to play school when I was a child, and I like school, and I continue to have a quest for learning new things.
Was this always the goal? Meaning, did you plan to achieve the level of education you've achieved?
You know, I think so, because when I graduated from Bethune-Cookman College, I had friends of mine who had begun study. I had the Bachelor of Science degree. I had friends who had already begun to work on their master's. I said, I can do that. So I was I guess you would call a pioneer, not a pioneer, a harbinger for going to school at the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida, because it was once that it was strictly all white, and they released they integrated their schools in 1959-60, because prior to that, you could attend courses that were under the auspices of the University of Miami, and this was in Coral Gables, but they would bring satellite courses to the all-black teachers or students. So they allowed us to go to the University of Miami, which was in Coral Gables, and that's where I began excuse me, studying for my master's. And I pursued that, and I didn't finish my master's there, but it was still about teaching. I had begun to teach, so I completed my Master of Science degree in elementary education at the Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, and I continued there to have a specialization in reading for my master's degree. And what didn't stop there. I was in class, and one of the professors said, "What do you think you want to be doing other than the master's degree?" And at the time where I was studying, I had finished my master's at Indiana University, and I'd started another program called a 6-year certificate. And this was to be in educational leadership, so you could become like a supervisor or a director or a principal. And I said to myself, you know, I'd like to have my doctorate. It wasn't, I remember, I don't know what class it was, but it just dawned on me, I'd like to get my doctorate also. You know, it was just one of those thoughts you have while you're listening to someone. I completed my 6th year at Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville, and this was before they had a doctoral program. And I said, later they established a doctoral program, and because they wanted students to continue in that program when it was in its beginning stages, you could transfer some of the credits that you'd already earned for your 6th year. And I said, oh, I can do this. So I became a doctoral student.
Wow.
At Southern Illinois in Edwardsville. And unfortunately or fortunately, my husband got a transfer to a job in Connecticut, and I had not finished, so I didn't do anything about that for a long time. And as a teacher, at this time I had moved to Connecticut, and I was teaching at a community college, and I had a counselor come into my class, and I said, she said, I want to have your class think about long-range goals. I said, okay. So I can remember it as if it says so clearly, Hannah. She said, take a sheet of paper, fold it in half, then fold it in half again, and then stretch it out. She says, and put the year that we're in now, and for the next 2 years, she said, and that's where you want to be in 5 years. She said, don't make the goals too far away, make it reachable. And I did that, you know, to encourage my college students to do so. And you remember I told you that I had this thought when I was working on my 6 years that I wanted my doctorate, but I had kind of like put it out of my mind. I said, I can do this. So I started the preparations for getting ready to go back to school to get my doctorate. And then they had this block that says that doctoral students had to live on campus. And I said to myself, I got a job, and I got 2 children and a husband in Connecticut. I can't stop all that for a year to go back to Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville. So I said, I'm going to have a conference with the dean of the School of Education. And I said, I'm very prayer warrior, and I asked God to help me with everything. So I prayed, and I called the dean that I had met earlier before I left Illinois. I said, you know, the same thing I said to you. I have a job, I have 2 sons and a husband, and I cannot take a year off to come and live on campus to do the residency requirement. I said, what if I could come back in the summers and live on campus for 4 consecutive summers, and that would be my 2-year residency requirement. And he said yes. So from that, I continued, and I did all the work, and finally, in 1988, I finished my doctoral work.
Wow.
Through summer work.
That sounds amazing. What were some of the challenges you faced by being a woman and by having so much knowledge?
Well, at the community college where I was working, when I was working on my doctorate, I applied for, we had a retirement in our school. I retired to become the dean in the education department. And I was African American woman, and I had finished my doctorate. And I was told, well, maybe you need a little more experience in administration. I said, well, I have been an assistant principal in Illinois. I was supervisor of reading in Illinois. And before that, before I went to Illinois, I was a supervisor for a summer program in Florida. I said, is this not educational leadership? I said, I finished my educational leadership certification. So anyway, I did not become a finalist for that. So I said, I said, and the person that they chose did not have as much experience that I have, but he was a white male. So I said, So that's that. They didn't say all the words that I saw, but it generally, African American females were not easily promoted. Didn't say it didn't happen, but it was not an easy thing. And I think that was that invisible, you talked about the geographics for living. Mm-hmm. There were some invisible lines. Some people call it the glass ceiling. And it not only applies to African American women, it applies to white women as well, that males tend to dominate leadership positions in educational organizations as well as in the wider business community.
Okay. Did you have a mentor or anyone that helped you get through college?
I had several people who were good to me. One lady who was so dear, she was the dean of women at Bethune-Cookman College when I was having great difficulty having funds to remain in school. And through her leadership and direction, she helped me secure a scholarship that was based on the fact that I was a Dean's List student and I sang in the concert chorale. And she found a couple who wanted to help someone who was in the concert chorale. And I remember their names, Mr. and Mrs. Frank Trevelyan at 2304 Woodbine Avenue in Lakeland, Florida.
Wow.
They were my sponsors and paid the tuition for me for 4 years so I could continue.
Wow.
Education. And I worked and this same lady gave me a work-study student working as her aide, a dean's aide, and I worked in the dormitories. And it was, they didn't call it work-study at that time, but I worked for I had one semester that was solving with my family, but for 3.5 years, I worked and never drew a salary. It went to pay my room and board, which, by the way, you won't believe was $49 a month.
Oh my God.
that was a long time ago.
Wow. Getting a little more personal, can you share with me how did you achieve your educational goals with regards to finances and affording your education?
Okay, I touched on that.
Yeah.
Is that I worked as an undergraduate student. And for an example, when I wanted to complete my doctorate, because, as I said to you, I had a husband and 2 children, I didn't want to disrupt our budget. So, before I told you I went to Southern Illinois, back for my doctorate, I was teaching at the community college, and I began to teach what they call interim courses, off-campus courses, so that was my little nest egg specifically for going back to school, so I didn't have to have any budget conversations that would disrupt what my family's budget was like. So I did extra work to make sure I had enough funds. But see, we're talking all these years ago. I finished my master's degree at Indiana University in Bloomington. But at the time, would you believe that college credits is not like it is now, was $11 per credit.
Wow.
So that means $33 you could take a three credit course. And generally in the summer, one would only take about 3 courses. So that $99 saved
Yeah.
made it easy to do that. So I worked for the funds that I needed to make sure
Yeah.
I can go work.
Can you tell us how it feels to look back and see how much of you have accomplished?
It feels wonderful to know. Well, what's most wonderful for me, sometimes I have one experience. I remember a young man who was in my reading class when I told you I was a reading teacher, and I said to him in print, because there were days I says, okay, we're not talking today, we're only reading, and I and I wrote next to him that you have great acumen. And he looked at me when I said, and you are tenacious as well. And he looked at me, and I said, I pointed to the dictionary. Fast forward to I don't know how many years later, I went back to Alton, Illinois, and I saw this young man who now was running a service station of his own, and he looked at me. He said, Dr. Johnson, I am practicing my tenaciousness and my acumen. He laughed. He said that made a milestone for him, that it made him want to know what words could do for him. So it's those kinds of things that come, that not necessarily with a lot of money and acclaim, but to know that you touched somebody's life enough that they discovered for themselves that they really had enough intellect to go on and do things. I've had other experiences like that. I went back to North Haven, Connecticut, and we went to the movie theater. And this young lady was one of the ticket sellers there. And I was not in line. I was standing to the side, and my husband was in line, and she looked up and she saw me. She said, Dr. Johnson. And she told my husband, she said, your wife was one of the best teachers I ever had in my life. Those are the kinds of things that money can't buy that. So if you know that, I remember Toya wanted to be a teacher, and if you can touch the lives of people and help them. And the last one was a student who was working on her doctorate. Another friend said, I can't help you, but I have a friend who, if she will, she can help you. She was having great difficulty doing what a lot of people have difficulty with who want to have a doctoral degree. You have to write what they call a dissertation. And it's kind of like a mini book of research that you do to add to the literature of education. And her topic had been rejected repeatedly, and then unfortunately the people who were working on the dissertation got a transfer, and she was just in limbo and running out of time. So she came to me and we sat and we talked, and she says, they rejected. She was in tears. They rejected. I said, I'm so sorry. I said, but you know, we just met. I said, I said, leave your materials with me, and the next time we talk, then I have something to work with. So when she came back, I said, please don't take this the wrong way. I said, but I would have rejected this too. And I said, please, I'm not trying to make you cry. I just want you to see. And what I did, I took a copy of my dissertation and showed her step by step what it is. But now this is a shout out for more structure. In some doctoral programs, you can give somebody a map, but if you don't give them all the guidelines for how to read that map, it's difficult. And this is my opinion. Anyway, fast forward to, she went back, and after our consultation, her dissertation topic got accepted. She did her research, and I got an email from her. This is maybe about 4 years ago now. She says, Dr. Johnson, we made it. And she included me in that. So it's that you said, what are the rewards? those are the kinds of rewards that money can't buy. To know that even in my retirement, I was able to help someone to help themselves. Because, and she said to me, nobody ever sat down and told me how to. I said, well, and so much for online study.
Yeah.
It's good, but the fact that we're talking to each other face to face is an important aspect of learning and exchange and interpersonal relationships. And I think, I don't know all of the history of this young lady, but I do know that with just about 3 or 4 sessions that we met together, and to really tweak what she needed to understand, it can help. And I think that's what teaching is all about, to help others find themselves. Okay?
Okay. If you hadn't done all of this study and being an educator, what would have you done differently?
I have thought about that, and I think, honestly, I was supposed to be a teacher. I remember in, I think, my sophomore year, I was taking, I won't forget it, public school music. And the professor at Bethune-Cookman College said to me, he said, Miss Hart, you know, maybe you should major in music because you sing well and you have the aptitude for whatever he was teaching us to do. He said, why don't you consider that? So when I talked to my mom, I said, Mom, it's been suggested that maybe I should change my major from elementary education to music. And Mom looked at me. Remember I told you I was working?
Yes.
Stop to say we didn't have any money. She said, no. Well, sweetheart, if he gonna pay for all that extra stuff that you need, he said, that's right. That's really good. If he gonna pay for all this stuff he telling you need to do. I said, oh, okay. Well, now I graduated elementary education major, and I did. But I do love music and I like to sing. But I think I really have been happy being an educator. It's not really in education in most states, not for the money, but it's because there is inner satisfaction and peace that one receives by being able to impart and help people learn to think for themselves.
Do you see yourself as a music teacher, or you don't?
Ooh, no. I'm not a music teacher, but I have been a choir director for my church, several churches that I've attended, and that's because we had a good pianist or organist who could help me. I can teach people how to sing certain things because I read music a little, well enough that I can teach them. No, I'm not. I am not a music teacher, no ma'am.
You've sent us some amazing images of you over the years, and I wanted to touch on a few. The picture of you as a young girl, the picture of you in high school in 1955, the picture of you pledging to your sorority, Delta Sigma Theater, is being part of...
Sigma Theta.
Yeah. Is being part of a sorority something you would recommend?
I think sorority life is great in that in most instances it builds a camaraderie between females who have similar interests and backgrounds, and it also introduces you to different ways of thinking about the same thing, because when you get a lot of people in organizations, you get different perspectives that you might not have gotten had you not listened to others. And for an example, Delta Sigma Theta sorority, founded in 1913, has a public service theme where they deal with giving back to the community. And I think that's a great thing. And there are some guidelines that are based on Christian principles that help you to, again, give back to your community in health issues of mental health, physical health, educational well-being, international relationships, and those are some of the facets that are contained in Delta Sigma Theta.
Okay. Can you tell me how you felt about this next image of you receiving your doctorate?
Oh, you remember I told you how I worked to get back and how I had to get it?
Yeah.
That was a happy day. This is the song says, "Oh, happy day."
Yeah.
That was a happy day. And do you know what was really one of the happiest events was that my mother was able to be. My father was now deceased. In fact, he died before I had finished my doctorate. But my mother and my aunt had been like the shoulders on which I stood to get a lot of things, and both of them were able to attend my graduation.
No.
Oh my goodness, that was fantastically wonderful to have these two women who together had been my backbone, my ribs, my sidekicks, my arms. They had sacrificed so much to make sure I had what I needed to complete my studies, the two of them. We'll never forget them.
Can you tell me about the image of you with Michelle Obama and Viola Davis?
The one with Michelle Obama was when President Obama was running for his second term as president. And we were paying guest at a fundraiser in Sarasota. And how it was kind of like based on amount of donation contribution for this event. And if you paid at a certain level, which we did pay, then one of the perks was that you got to take a picture with Michelle Obama. So we said we can do that. It was one of the greatest contributions we think we ever made to have a picture with her. I said, and in a similar fashion, when we were at this was for President Obama's second run for president.
Mm-hmm.
And with Viola Davis, I was at the time a mentor at the Boys and Girls Club of Collier County. And it was also a fundraiser. And again, with a certain amount of donation contribution, you got a chance to get a picture taken with Viola Davis, who was the guest speaker at that event. And she had been, as a child, she had been a part of the Boys and Girls Club, and she too remarked on what a great service it was to children who were not rich and needed help.
Wow.
So contributions, I think, would be the answer I'd give of how we came to be able to do that, because we made a contribution.
Mm-hmm.
They call it a ticket, but it was much more than
a contribution.
It was contributions that we were able to do that.
Yeah. Can you share some of the happiest moments of your life?
Well, I'll tell you the happiest one is that when I finally finished my doctoral studies, thank you, Jesus. But I think the birth of my children who were healthy, and those, I have two sons. Wow, and when you read so much about pregnancies that do not end well, to have two healthy children,
yeah.
Yes, very, very happy about that, and continue to be happy that they have grown up to be men of integrity and have married and have their own families. That's something that you're not assured is going to happen because you have children, that they're going to, as the folks say, turn out all right. And that's been very, very happy for me. And of course, my marriage to my husband, that was who helped me to get those two sons.
Can't forget him. What was the proudest moment of your life?
Well, I think to have my sons come back to me was not so proud, but just so grateful. Several years ago now, I was awestruck when my sons took me aside with my husband, and said, Mom and Dad, we want you to know that we really appreciate how you raised us. And I said, thank you, Jesus. I don't know, because their nickname for me particularly, the boys used to call me behind my back Sarge. So they told me this after they were adults. But to have your children realize that you are not being mean or punitive, but trying to have them be great thinkers about what it is to be a good person inside. And I think I remember that they came together to tell us that. That's breathtaking, you know.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So I think that, as I said, things don't come in money. If you notice, most of the things that have made me happiest and honestly in my life have not been about how much money it was, but the fact that a life or lives were changed. And I think about I had a mentee. I've only had a mentee that I did consecutively for 4 years. And at the time that started several years ago, I said to her, was a senior citizen now, a little younger senior citizen, I said, you know, I was reluctant to take this menteeship for 4 years. She was in 9th grade. I said, I hope I'm going to still be alive in 4 years. I said, but things happen. I said, so I want to be your mentor. And I said, and the one thing I want you to know about me is that you will hear me say, and I want you to know if this is going to bother you, you're going to hear me say, I'm a Christian, and I'm going to want to pray with you. So if that's going to make it difficult for you, I said, then no. Anyway, long story short, we stayed together. And to see, it's kind of like you talk about the metamorphosis of a caterpillar to a butterfly. I watched my 9th grade caterpillar blossom into the most beautiful butterfly, and she has graduated from University of Tampa in international relationships.
Wow.
She is, you know, it's that here again. You said to have touched someone's life that it makes a difference. That's been great, and to have done it in my senior years and with a young lady with a doctorate is just wonderful. That you can make a difference in someone's life. You know, those kinds of things have been very, very good.
Do you have any more specific goals that you would like to achieve at this point in your life?
Well, when I die, I want to go to heaven. So that's my major goal I'm working on, to love others as I love myself, and to love God with all my heart, soul, and mind, and to make a difference even now in the lives of people that I meet, and to have them know that we need to love one another and give God glory and praise for all of our accomplishments. And I know that there are people who do not believe that, but it's all good, because God is real in my life, and He'll be real in any life who will accept Him and say, Lord Jesus, come into my heart and change me so that I can love people despite what they do or say or how they act. So that's my goal.
How did you get introduced to the island?
Oh, this is a beautiful story. Friends of ours that we've known for several years, they started coming to the Vineyard when they were youth, because they lived in the Boston area. And we had heard about the Vineyard. We've never been. We were their guests in 1987 during the Labor Day weekend. And have you ever been someplace, and it's kind of like when you see a dress-up pass, you say, wow, I like that. And it was kind of like when we were here for the weekend, both my husband and I said, wow, this is nice. We like it. And my friends laugh at me when I tell this story, so they're very straightforward. And my friend's husband said, well, I'm glad you guys like this place, but please know this is not going to be a habit. We're not going to invite you. We're not going to invite you back every year, but we'll help you find a place to rent. So we started renting, and this was 1987. And we started renting, and we rented a place here for 12 consecutive years. And in 1999, we purchased our own property. And we moved into our new home in 2003. So we have we were introduced by dear friends who still live here, and they live here now. They were not living here at full time at the time. We had met them in Connecticut. But now they're a full-time resident. They've retired, and they're full-time residents of the Vineyard. And we laugh about that story when our friends said, don't think this is going to be a habit now. We ain't invite you every year. So that's what, you see how honesty with friends, so that's good, so he let us know. But he did help us find a place. And we have been in each other's lives since 1978, 79. We're still friends.
Wow.
And the fact is that we only live about 3 blocks from them. We were able to get a property very close to theirs, and we see each other often. But that's how we got introduced by dear friends. 1987.
Wow. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about Carter G. Woodson, the founder of the National Organization of Asalh?
The National Association for the Study of African. Yes, Dr. Woodson was born in 1875, and this year we'll be celebrating his 147th birthday. He is noted for a lot of things, and I would not even attempt to tell you all the stuff about him, but I recommend a site is called Black Excellus, and it gives 10 specific facts that are historically based about his life, other than he was born in 1875. But I would like for people to get this website, asalh.org. Gives all of the information about the organization that he founded, but he's mostly noted for the fact that they call him the father of Black history, because he initiated Black History Week in the 1920s. And in the 1970s, it was through much political work, became Black History Month. When he organized it, it was called Negro History Month. Now it's called Black History Month, and the name has become the Association for the Study of African American Life and History rather than Negro life. And that has been a model for other organizations to go on and get celebratory months for their particular organizations. What is continuing to be is that the Journal of African American History is still being published now. The African American Black History Bulletin is being published now. And in 2017, the 80th anniversary of the Black History Journal was there, and it still continues to be served there. But I would ask everyone to really get specifics about the Association for the Study of African American Life and History and Carter G. Woodson by going to asalh.org, because the facts that I'm going to give will be forgotten. But for those who are really interested, go to asalh.org, and you will find the history of Dr. Woodson and all of the great things that are currently happening with Asalh, in that, as I said, if he were alive, he'd be 147. But this year will be the 107th conference and national meeting that will be held in Alabama. So the organization is strong and continues to grow. So that we need to go on with that.
What are the objectives of the Asalh organization locally?
Locally, we adhere to for an example, this is the 2022 theme is Black Health and Wellness. And would you believe tomorrow, at the local level, the Martha's Vineyard branch is presenting Karen Jones, who's the CEO and president of the National Caucus of Black Health. And at 7 o'clock tomorrow, we will be presenting her, and she'll be talking about health and wellness for underrepresented groups. We had locally, we work with Martha's Vineyard TV, Oak Bluffs Public Library, Martha's Vineyard Museum, the NAACP, and the League of Women Voters. We collaborate when we do Black History Month. So we started doing that about 5 years ago, so that we are wanting to have all organizations come together to talk about what Dr. Woodson started for Black History Month, so that we work with organizations in the community. Asalh has joined forces also with the Martha's Vineyard Diversity Coalition, and that our programs are similar in that we're doing oral interviews as we're doing with the this program, the Cooperative Oral History program that we talked about earlier, that we have intentional conversations between youth and senior age citizens who either reside here full-time or part-time to share history as we're doing right now. That program is ongoing. For an example, through the Martha's Vineyard Diversity Coalition, I was a reader for a third grade class at Edgartown School, and Mrs. Gail LaChapelle's third grade class. And there are others of us who are doing that. But what we are able to do is to collaborate and have the organization goals of Asalh and Martha's Vineyard Diversity Coalitions established, in that we need to have collective cooperation within our community. For our next month in July, Dr. James Comer, who is the Maurice Falk Professor of Psychiatry at Yale University, will be our speaker in July. On August 1st, our particular branch will be celebrating the same thing, Black Health and Wellness, where we will be presenting 5 physicians moderated by Charlene Hunter Galt. And our panelists will be Dr. Louis Sullivan, Dr. George Brandt, Dr. Gary Gazier, Dr. Dirk Johnson, and Dr. Donna Jones. And we'll be talking about issues that, other issues, but specifically those that deal with senior age citizens and the kinds of issues that have evolved during COVID and perhaps before. And in September, we will be presenting Dr. Aaliyah Brown, who is a physician cardiologist here on the Vineyard. She will be our speaker for our Founders Day program at Union Chapel here in Oak Bluffs. And our final program for the year will be we're presenting Dr. Vicki Johnson, who is the founder of Soul Wealth and the host of a radio show in Washington, D.C. called Soul Wealth. So we continue to try and do things that keep the life and history of African Americans ever present in our community. So this is how we develop our programs, so that we include informational programs for our local community.
I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. I learned so much from you, and thank you for sharing your story with us. I'm Hannah Santos from MVRHS, and this is Dr. Thelma Hart Johnson, President of the Martha's Vineyard branch of Asalh. And here is a little something that we got for you.
Oh, thank you. Oh my goodness, that is beautiful. I appreciate it. Thank you, Hannah.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Wow. I love flowers. I didn't mention that, but I
I'm
do.
glad you liked it.
Thank you.